Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's an honor for for us to have you. All right. You sat through a bit of that debate. Here is
Yeah,
your
really, really
audience.
good.
Um, you can speak better than I can on you. Could you tell them who you are, what brought you here, what you have to say, and how this happens, and then I will hand you over.
All right, a little bit of history. I think you covered it pretty well. I was involved with the National Socialist Movement, quite often known as America's Nazi Party. I was involved in that for 27 years, 25 as the national leader. And about 2 years ago, I walked away from the organization, walked away from hate and racism, and now I'm a human rights activist, and I work for a nonprofit called Beyond Barriers. And our work is to get people out of extremism, to help people walk away, and to bring attention to these kind of issues, and hopefully and help the nation heal.
Okay. There's been a lot of people that want to talk to to Mr. Schoep. We have a range of questions. You have someone who'd like to join the voice chat and have a conversation. Those of you who want to know what is it like to be a member of a Nazi movement, what is it like to be a leader, what is it like to live with violence, what is it like to spread hatred, what is it like to face your victims and your previous targets. Cue the questions up. I will field it. Sean, Yana, if you'd like to join in voice chat. Yana has a background involved with extremist groups, and so I would welcome this conversation. I need chat to listen very carefully. This is not your life, this is theirs. Yana, you in? We got you?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm right here. Yep.
One of the first questions that matters to a lot of people, they're going to want to know specifically what is it that caused you to walk away for
Is,
both of you.
is that question directed at you
It's
right away,
directed
or
at you. It's directed at you. Both of
okay?
you can answer.
For me, wanting to walk away, there was a lot of different reasons, but the main reason is because I was de-radicalizing. I had been de-radicalizing since about 2016. Some of the people that I had met, some of the figuring things out, being involved in an extremist organization for a long time. As somebody that was very dedicated to what I believe in, to what I fight for. I was I was going on principles of honor, loyalty, duty, all these sort of things. And when you don't believe in those things anymore, it's hypocritical to continue on in that manner. So it was meeting some incredible people along the way. Daryl Davis was one of them. Daryl's a black musician. Dia Khan was another one. She's a Muslim filmmaker. There was a lot of other people as well, but these are two public figures, so I can speak about them, and they don't mind me talking about it. But meeting them and being able to see their humanity, when you're in an extremist movement, a lot of times all you see, all you're able to process is your own tribe, your own people. You're inside this bubble, or trapped behind these barriers. Basically, you set up the barriers in your mind, but you're behind them. So all you're seeing and hearing is an echo chamber, or what's going on behind those barriers. So I was very closed off to the rest of the world, and could only see my tribe, my people. And it wasn't until meeting some of these other people, the so-called others, um, that I was able to see their humanity. And for me, then, instead of seeing this cause that I was fighting for so many years as being noble and honorable, I saw how that was damaging other incredible people. And I wasn't able to see that before. I just didn't pay attention to it. I stayed behind those barriers, and I wasn't able to see that. So once I was able to see their humanity and see how this cause was damaging, not just to them, but putting that into a larger perspective and seeing how it could damage humanity in general, for me, that was it. I had to be done. I should have left the organization probably a couple of years before I did. And those are a lot of the, I could explain that, but that's a long story as well. But the complexities in leaving, especially when you're in a leadership position, are really heavy stuff. So um, the positive thing is for me at least is that I finally left. But those are things that I struggle with, is why I didn't leave sooner, or why I didn't figure out these things sooner. But
Mm.
there it is.
Wow. Um, Chat is flying at us with questions, and I'd like a chance for and Mr. Scoop to speak. Mainly the questions, very interested in exactly how did you de-radicalize given the mindset you have to maintain while you're in? What cracked that Nazi mindset open for you? How did that happen?
Uh,
I,
Specifically,
mhm.
oh, it was. Oh, go ahead.
I think they want to
yeah.
know what it felt like for that to happen.
I mean, I can kind of answer that myself. I'm not. I didn't. I wasn't quite as, and Mr. Schoep
Scoop.
can kind of speak on this a little bit better if he needs to. But I
What?
ran around with more of the militant extremists while not being directly a part of their groups. You know, C13, AWD, all them. Um, remember, and maybe it's different for Mr. Schoep, but
Scoop.
it's Scoop. I'm sorry. it's uh, it's important to remember, at least in my case, and for a lot of the people that I did speak with when I was in that group, that the undercurrent that underpins a lot of the ideology is a genuine belief that the white race is going to come to an end, and it's an actual fear. It's a legitimate fear because they don't want their futures to come to an end. Um,
Wow.
they there is a distinct inability to separate the construct of whiteness and being a white person or a Caucasian person or European descended person. There is a distinct inability to separate those two things. And when you put them together, when you were seeing the rise of toxic masculinity and destroy whiteness, they they took it as an attack. I took it as an attack being half white. I took it as an attack on me and my family. And that's where that fear comes from, and where these people tend to fall down those pipelines and become radicalized like I did, and start thinking, oh, it's the international Jew. I'm sorry if that's offensive, but that's kind of the narrative that's spun. As far as what it felt like to to have that world come crashing down on you, it's terrifying. And maybe for Mr. Shoop here, maybe it's
Scoop.
different for him. Shoop, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm gonna
Like
get that
ice
wrong
cream, just like ice
a
cream,
couple
only spelled
times.
differently. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Scoop. So maybe it's different for him, but for me, because I was running around with people that could easily find me and people that would come after me, it's scary. It's it's one of the most terrifying things you could experience. Like I would rather have to come out of like a crypt, like the Crips or the Bloods, and have to come out of a radicalized group of white of National Socialist extremists. That's how scary it can be because they will not stop with just you. They will go after your family, your
Mm.
friends, your job, everything. They will take everything.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Scoop, Yana. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you're willing to come and share this in dialogue.
Mm.
So, Mr. Scoop, what do you think about what Yana's saying and your own experience of it? What happened to you when you left? When you
No, he nailed
deradicalized?
it on a lot of things there, and I absolutely respect your courage in speaking out, and it takes a lot of strength. So thank you for sharing that. For me, there was a few different aspects. What Yana had mentioned about people in the movement feeling fear, that was something when I was in it, it was something that I would never have acknowledged. When I met Dia Khan, she kept posing those questions to me. She kept saying, well, this sounds kind of like fear. It sounds kind of like the movement is afraid of this or that. And it really agitated me at the time. I was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, Dia. You don't know what you're talking about. But when you process this stuff, when you get out, it's just like Yana said. I mean, it is very much fear based. The movement thrives on it. I mean, that's what gets these guys and ladies motivated, and keeps them in these movements is that fear. Now, that's the first part, like as far as like being involved in it and why you're involved in it, the driving factors. A lot of it is, you think, as I was saying earlier, you truly believe that you are doing something to protect your people, that your people are going to be wiped out, that there's this international conspiracy, to go after, white people and wipe them out and all this kind of stuff. And I know it sounds funny to people on the outside, but when you're in that environment and you're in that echo chamber or that bubble or behind those barriers, you truly believe that. I wouldn't have stayed there 27 years for, on a whim. I stayed there because I really believed that. Now, when you start breaking down those constructs and you start realizing that that's not accurate, that that's not the way life is, it's like a slap in the face,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to process that if you're involved in it, and everybody that your whole social network, literally, for some people they have no social network outside of the movement. Luckily for me, I still had some, family. I still
Are
had
you
a
sure I'm
few
on YouTube?
friends that were
Yep. I'm
outside
streaming
of
on YouTube.
of
What?
it, but the vast majority of the people that I knew were involved in it, and that's the way it is for just about, I would say, most people that are in it. That's how it works, because a lot of times your family will cut you off, or you'll cut them off. I've seen that over the years, so that's pretty common. Now, what Yana was talking about, the fear on leaving, this is something that, a lot of that, I think, varies from group to group, and I think it is a legitimate concern, and it kind of depends on the group that you're running with and things like that, and it also depends on, I'm trying to think of the best way to break down that construct. For me, being involved in an organization like this, as far as like when I was going through the different processes for myself, like to get out, um, yeah, I knew I was going to get some threats, and I knew, there's always a risk, but I try not to focus too much on those type of things. I live my life in a certain manner for a very long time. I we talk about fear, but as far as like physical fear, things like that, I'm always very aware of my surroundings and things like that. But if someone's going to attack me, it's not going to work out for them very well. So you, that's just kind of, that's how I handle it. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
it really, it depends on the group, and it depends on the individual and things like that. But I really try not to focus on those things, and especially with people that are coming out, because that just adds on a whole nother layer of stress and things to think about, if you're worried about that. But I do know, it's very similar to what Yana was talking about. Like I do know some people that have actually like left the city or state that they're in to kind of get away from their crew, in that area. Maybe sometimes it's fear based, and other times it's just, see, you don't have that same environment and you're not around that, fresh start somewhere new sometimes is really a good thing for people.
Mm.
Mhm.
So, is it fair to say that, of course, beyond hate, for a hate group, its most common secondary emotion would have to be fear?
I think I would say it's, fear is the first
Mhm.
Mm.
factor. Hate. I mean, hate is a complicated thing. Like, and I think you and I have discussed this before, but for the audience, for the listening audience, hate is not the driving factor about why people get
Mhm.
involved in these things. And I want
Mhm.
to preface that. I want to
Mhm.
preface that by saying Hate is developed there, hate is nurtured there, and hate is definitely part of it. I'm not trying to minimize the hate part of it, but people don't typically join these movements because they hate everybody. Now, I've experienced those people, as the leader of the NSM. There was people that would come in and say, "Well, I hate," and I'm not going to say the words on Twitch or Discord or whatever we're on, but I don't want to say those words anyways. But that's usually not the driving factor. If someone comes and joins the movement and they're just bubbling over with hate, typically in my mind, those people, as the leader of the organization, those people made me a little nervous because I felt like they were potential liabilities. That hate burns hard and it burns fast. So if you're
Hmm.
someone that's coming in and your reason for joining is that you hate everybody, those people didn't last very long. They would be in, if they stuck around more than a couple of years, it was pretty shocking. So I don't want to minimize that. There's nuance to that question because
Hmm.
hate is certainly there. It's not the driving factor. The driving factor typically is that fear. What Yana mentioned, about fear of being wiped out, fear of our race being attacked, things like that, and it's also the preservation. That they're thinking the movement person that's joining is thinking they're doing something good actually, and that's why they're joining. If someone's joining something like, ooh, that's evil, and I want to be part of that, there's maybe some psychological issues they need to get straightened out. So, and honestly, like, this is part of the problem when people are looking at hate groups and movement groups and things like that. It's so easy to just say, oh well, it's all about hate and things like that, and throwing everybody in a box
Hmm.
and not really truly understanding the driving factors. If you don't understand the driving factors, you can't help anybody. You're not going to fix these problems.
Exactly. To Mr. Scoop's point, he has commissioned research on extremism in the USA to mainly protect victims or potential victims and try to identify factors in helping people get out and giving them a reason to maybe change their mind before they get in. And so he's committed to that. Something these people need to be understood, or you're just going to see more Wednesday coups coming from it.
Mm.
One of the interesting questions was, do you think that, and this is for Mr. Scoop, do you think that the main reason people stay in is that they get stuck in a double bind, especially with the high control, very narcissistic groups?
What specifically do you mean by that?
Double bind. You can't really stay in, right? But you can't leave, and the group that you're involved in has very high control. Um, Protocols with leaders that are narcissistic.
Well, I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, you do have some of that. I've seen that. I can think of a few examples. I don't
Right.
I don't really want to name anybody, but I can
Okay.
think of a few examples where, with a narcissistic leader at the helm, and a lot of times those groups don't do real well because it becomes like a cult of personality.
Hmm.
Um, and keyword here is cult. Now, cult. When I was in the movement, I didn't like that word, and uh, I was bringing a lot of different girls that I was dating around to events and things like that. And one after the other, they kept saying, these are women from outside of the movement. They kept saying, man, this group that you're with is like a cult. It's like a cult. And it was making me angry at the time. I was like, man, what is wrong with all these girls? Why do they keep saying this? One after the other, and I'm still not seeing it. I didn't actually process that until after I got out, but they all noticed it and I didn't. So the problem was with me, not with them.
Hmm.
And I think that's really common for people that are in the movement is they don't view it that way, but it is very very cult like. So yes, to answer your question,
Hmm.
you feel very much stuck there, and that was something even as I was getting out, some of the people that I was still talking to that were in were, coming at me with concerns, so to speak, and saying like, well, what are you going to do now? Like, the society always will see you as the Nazi party leader.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you are. That's what you've done with your life. And those are some of the like private struggles that I had in my head, too, about leaving my business. Everything was tied into what I did in the movement. I gave up
Mm-hmm.
everything to walk away.
Wow.
So it really, everybody's journey is a little different. Some are more complex in that way, and then two, different groups. Some of the groups that are more violent, then there's definitely that concern, like what Yana had said about leaving. Like, if they're in your neighborhood and it's a violent group, you do have that to be concerned about too. So there's all kinds of different things that I think a lot of people on the outside uh, don't think about. And I'm not saying anybody should feel sympathy for us or anything like that. I mean, we made those choices, those bad choices, but it's not always as simple as just saying like, I'm just gonna, go home from the football game. I'm done. It's not it's not, it's not that simple.
It's a very heavy flag to carry, especially for 25 years. That flag doesn't stop waving for a very long time.
Well,
It's. Go ahead.
I do I want to build on what Mr. Scoop was actually saying about
Okay.
people are more inclined to only see the ex-Nazi. They're more inclined to only see that part of him, and it's kind of that's why I'm kind of like about like talking about my past
Sure.
being in a similar situation, because the last thing I want is for people to be, oh, well, he was a Nazi too. I don't want people to know me as, oh, that indigenous guy that was an ex-Nazi. I want to be, oh, that indigenous guy that's trying to move forward from that past. And maybe it's different for Mr. Scoop, but I can definitely understand where people are going to be inclined to see those kinds of things, because of his past, 25 years or 27 years in, the National Socialist movement. That's definitely going to color a lot of people's look or their view of him, and other people coming out of extremist movements.
Hmm. The optics of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mr. Scoop has said, "That's it. You're a Nazi. You're always going to be a Nazi." The Charlottesville lawsuit is effectively punishing him for that. Um, there are some other really very good questions. One of them is interesting here. Mr. Scoop, did you ever, I'm going to paraphrase, did you ever encounter a leader in the movement whose radical approach was so extreme that it made you change your mind?
That is a good question. There was to change my mind. No, to steer clear of some of those groups, or let me phrase it this way. There was certain group leaders that would say, um, I'm trying to think of some really good examples because there's so many. But okay, after the World Trade Center attack, there
Oh,
was a couple of there was a couple of people, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a couple of leaders at the time that were saying something like, "Oh, if our people had the testicular fortitude to do something like that, we'd really be getting somewhere." And there was another guy
ooh,
that suggested aligning with the terrorist group at the time, and they were not saying this stuff in closed door meetings. They were saying this stuff very openly and publicly,
ooh,
and like online or on their radio shows or in forums or different things like that. These were, or to media. I mean, these were very open public statements that anybody could see, and I
wow.
can tell you that made me incredibly nervous. And
Mm,
the first thing that went in my mind, um, uh, when you had people saying things like that, and I'd always tell the people in the NSM, hey, we don't have the proof yet. But if somebody's saying those type of things, the first thing that came to my mind was either this is somebody that's working for the government undercover, and that's why they're saying those things to try to kind of like root out other people that might
Mhm.
go do acts of violence,
Mhm.
or that they were somebody that was going to be on their way to jail soon, prison, or that they were really, really stupid. But typically, the
Oh my God.
typically
That's fine. That's
weren't.
perfect. Thank you so much for that.
It's true. I mean,
It
I mean
is.
that's how we viewed it. So, did I change my mind though because of some of these ignorant and terrible statements? No, it just the organization that I was a part of, we had a lot of we were pretty strict. It had a structure and rules and things like that had to be followed. So it was a lot more strict than a lot of the other organizations. So
Mhm.
we just didn't allow that. If we had people in our own group, and over the years I'd heard some really messed up things from people, what they would suggest, you would they would get one warning, because sometimes the younger kids coming in would think that they would need to say things, violent things, to the leadership, their local chapter leaders, state unit leaders, regionals, or whatever, where they thought that to impress those leaders that they would need to say or suggest bad things. So in those cases, we'd say, listen, you've got one warning. If you're saying something like this, we think you're either working for somebody or you're an idiot and you're going to go to prison. So here's your one warning. If you do it again, you're thrown out. And that's
Mm.
that's how we, as long as I can remember, that was a policy that we had.
And most of this chat, the two guests sitting here can understand how the kind of paranoia in a group like this would lead you to think that the person saying these things might be a plant in order to instigate us. But the ordinary person doesn't think that way and has never had to. So, can you speak a bit about the level of paranoia that you have, especially as a leader in a group like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. For one, sometimes they were plants. I
Sure.
mean, we I can say, when I do interviews and things like that, I'm very transparent,
Hmm.
and I'm honest, and that's just how I was raised.
Hmm.
But sometimes they were plants, and a lot of times they weren't. And sometimes it was people that really wanted to go do those things. So I felt in a lot of ways like, I would, when we were training new leaders in the group, whether it was for regional, state, local chapter, city chapter, whatever, we would be telling them, like, don't get too excited about your promotion, because promotion just means more responsibility. You
Hmm.
have to be that, you have to be counselor, you have to be police officer, you have to be all these things, to keep your people in line. And I mean, people would call you up with marital problems, family problems. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered the full question on that, or
Mm.
if that was what
Can
was the question
you
again?
can you say specifically, let me make it concrete. For instance, as a leader of a National Socialist movement, do you remember how many times you caught a plant or how many times you had to deal directly with federal agents?
Mm. No, I don't. I couldn't even tell you how many times, but we caught some. Other times, we had people sitting in courtrooms that
Hmm.
would call and inform us, like so and so was the snitch that set up so and so.
Oh,
We had sometimes people. We got tips sometimes. I don't know how much I want to answer that question,
that's
but
fine.
uh, I can say a lot of times, and we also ran counterintelligence. That's where I was going with.
Hmm.
We ran counterintelligence operations, so we infiltrated other groups on the other side, and things like that, and sent people in to gather information for us. A lot of people don't realize how they look at the NSM, and a lot of times organizations that monitor groups like the NSM, they would say things like, "Oh, the group was one of the more crude, and they thought we were stupid, and basically, had no idea we were running these kind of operations behind the scenes."
Huh.
And it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing, but it just
Mm-hmm.
uh, we had non-disclosure forms and things like that to protect the
Mm-hmm.
security of the membership, and so there was a lot of times though, and I can well, this is interesting. Now the
Mm-hmm.
government back in the day, back in like say the 90s, it was very easy to pick out their informants
Mm-hmm.
most of the time because they would come right out the gate and say illegal things or try to get you involved in illegal things. You'd know right away who they were.
Mm.
Um, and that's why we put in things like probationary periods for our members, even though the organization I was a part of was not doing illegal things per se. We were still extremely paranoid of everyone. I mean, even if someone came around that joined the group that didn't fit the mold or was a little bit different, a lot of times people would think that they were undercover agents or things like that. It was extremely paranoid, and that answers your question as
Mm.
far as like the paranoia and suspicions. We were suspicious of everybody, even
It,
people towards the end. Some of the informants and things like that had been in for years, and that was not common back in the 90s. But in more recent years, yeah.
it's easy to see then that you would place fear over hatred as a priority because I'm thinking most people aren't thinking about the paranoia, and that would definitely rank fear as one of the highest, strongest emotions happening within a group like this. Do you know what the consequences would have been for you and your group had the FBI apprehended you on charges? What would have happened to you and your group?
Well, there wasn't anything that was going on specifically, but I mean, I've been raided before.
Mm-hmm.
I've had feds visit, knock on the door and ask questions and things like that. So I mean, that's pretty common, I think, especially the more high profile you are, the more they're looking into you and things like that. But I'm not sure how to answer the question because it's a hypothetical. I know you're asking a hypothetical, but
Mm-hmm.
what exactly are you asking? Like what if somebody did something to I'll let you ask.
If okay, so something a lot of people don't know about the NSM is under Jeff's leadership, not a single member of NSM has ever been arrested for violence at a rally, which is look at this today. That is unreal. But let's say something like Charlottesville happened at one of the NSM's own rallies, something like this coup. Let's say something federal went down. What do you know what the consequences might have been? What you might have been facing in terms of any kind of charge that could have been placed against you? Maybe anything they
Right.
yeah, yeah, even trumped up
Yeah.
charges, right? What do you think they would have done to you?
Well, that's why we had such strict regulations is because we learned from that any type of thing, um, and that's a good point. Nothing, no one from the NSM was ever arrested at a rally in all those years because of our strict regulations and our strict rules. And as far as violence was concerned, you didn't attack anybody unless you were attacked. Then it was self defense.
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of the rules we had in place. Now, to say no one from the NSM ever got in trouble or got in violence would be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
There was all kinds of people from the organization that had gotten involved in terrible things off on their own. But when they were in our sphere of influence, I don't know if that's the right term, but
Mm-hmm.
at an event, at an NSM event, things were strict. So we didn't have anybody ever get arrested at a rally or anything like that. But as far as what the system could do, it really depends. Like say, okay, I'll make up a hypothetical. Say
Okay.
we were at a rally and we just charged like a group of peaceful protesters and just started beating them. Now, there'd probably be hate crime charges involved in that, and who knows? I mean, lots of charges, lots of problems. So there was strict rules in place for things like that.
So suffice it to say, the controls were so tight because of the reality of the consequences. Um, your group stands in such a stark contrast to many of the other extremist groups. Um, I'll ask you very briefly, and either one can answer, but if Mr. Scoop can take the lead, the overlap with fundamentalist religion in these spaces. Um,
Mm.
are fundamental evangelical groups in particular sort of pre-grooming people to sort of follow these highly authoritarian and complicit mindsets? What is your opinion on that?
I think that's kind of a stretch. I think that to say, to pick on one specific religion or branch of the Christian religion or anything like that, and say that that's a precursor for extremism, I think is kind of a stretch. Is religion, or can religion be used as a precursor or as a radicalizer? Absolutely. We see it all the time. We did it in the NSM, even though we didn't adhere, we specifically did not adhere to a specific religion. We
Mm-hmm.
still wanted to know what the individual's religion was. Now, in our
Mm-hmm.
handbooks, religion is for home, family, church, whatever. And about half the organization, it's 40%, 45%, whatever, was Christian. 40, 45% was pagan, Odin, and 10% other religions, atheism or creativity or other types of Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, different kind of religions. But any kind of religion can be weaponized in a sense, and groomed for extremism. Look at groups like Muslim extremist groups are perfect examples, or
Mm-hmm.
Christian identity in the movement, or a lot of religions could be utilized.
KKK are known to
Uh,
be very fundamentalist and evangelical. Going to one of their rallies is like going to church, right?
from my side, obviously, I mean, what Mr. Scoop experienced is there is a dovetail between our experiences, because like I'd mentioned, the NSM kind of appears as more of the suit and tie front end, whereas
The
the groups
stylish
that
Nazis. Yeah, okay.
insofar as there's a very strict set of policies and rules that the members and the leaders need to adhere to, to set an example that they need to adhere to. Whereas when it comes down to the more boots on the ground paramilitary groups,
Mm.
perfect example, O9A, Order of the Nine Angels, weaponizes religion in kind of a similar way. They are, I want to say, Luciferian, not specifically satanic, but I believe Luciferian. They will actively look for Luciferians to that are already primed to believe these things, and then they will pounce on that. And you have the same thing within
Mm.
the Asatru Folk Assembly. And obviously, I'm a pagan. This is unrelated to my past, but I've been a pagan for 8 or 9 years now.
You got your Thor's
But
hammer. Thank you, Odin.
yep, Mjolnir. Yep. Uh, for example, the Asatru Folk Assembly, while the former head of the AFA, Steve McNallen, is never directly aligned himself with the NSM or anything like that. Uh, obviously, there was obviously NSM members that were part of that, and uh, obviously there were other groups that were also part of the AFA that, while the NSM might not have done this, but other groups would. Things like Sons of Odin, Nordfront would capitalize on this the Germanic religions, whether regardless of their sect, whether it's Norse or continental, they would kind of capitalize on these things and target these members because they're already in the AFA, which is already geared towards the kind of ideology that we're talking about right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so with the boots on the ground kind of thing, these paramilitary groups, yes, they do tend to target different religious sects and different types of religion in order to target these people to kind of bring them into the fold. And of course, you have your atheists, but it's more there's there's almost a there's almost to a lesser extent atheists within the boots on the ground types of organizations, the paramilitary groups.
So
There's almost less of that.
religion is rather complex within these groups. It
Yeah,
sounds like, although many people have a religious affiliation, that doesn't seem to be the determining factor. However,
right.
research will shed some light. I'm going to synthesize several of these questions. They do have a theme, so I'll make it briefly. Are leaders really as coldly passionate as they appear to be to the observers? Is all that emotion and intensity, is that really there? Is one interest. In other words, should the audience believe in the fear and the hatred that's being spread? Or is that all for show? And how do you move past the social alienation of having been a Nazi? Many on the left, as you all know, refuse to associate with anyone that even tries to say, hey, give that guy a listen, be fair. Will not, will absolutely reject. How do you move past that social alienation? And is that front of hate speech, etc., in the leaders and that passion, is that real? Those are the two main questions.
You're trying to double up on the questions here.
I do. I warned you. I'm horrible for that, but I'm going to synthesize it out of respect for your time.
That's all right. The first one, as far as the passion and things like that, when you're out there and the best examples I can give, from my personal experience is I can go back to the best examples I have for that is bringing people from outside the group into the group to see or to what they're doing. So in my case, this was typically whatever girl I was dating at the time, and a lot of them would say, I know I keep going back to that, but it's
Hey,
true.
hey, hey.
So
Some guys have it, okay?
so what they would say is that they were like, a lot of them actually didn't like the NSM, not
Sure.
just because of the cult environment, but they didn't like the hate, they didn't like the racism, all this kind of stuff. But they went, basically to support me, or to see what I was doing, or keep an eye on me. It depended on the girl, but it was. They would say it's really interesting watching you give speeches because at home or in your personal life you're very calm, you're very it's like when you go to a rally and you get behind the microphone, it's like bam, hitting a light switch and it's a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Not like split personality disorder or anything like that, but like you go into movement mode. So when I would be at event, I was a different, in a way, like a different person than I was at home. Where I was at home, I was just like anybody else, but at the event, that I was the commander, I was the boss, whatever. So that was really interesting, I think, for people on the outside in my personal life to see that, because it was something they didn't see at home or when we'd go out to dinner or or wherever. They didn't see that. That wasn't it wasn't always like that. So it really depends, I think, on the person, but I don't think even the other leaders from other groups that I knew, I don't, them behind the microphone a lot of times was the same way. They're not that person at home. A lot of that is rhetoric, a lot of that is propaganda, a lot of that is
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. So
Hmm.
the next part of your question, and see, now that I've explained all that, um, I
How
may
did
have
you
to ask you to
reintegrate? How did you
reintegrate. Yeah.
reintegrate? How did you deal with the social alienation after you left? Because it's not. See, how did you deal with that?
I still deal with that. I think that's something that it'll maybe always be there, because there's always people that um, will cast judgment or doubt one's sincerity, or just they just can't get past it. That sometimes people change, sometimes people don't. It's just it really depends, and but I would say for the most part, most people have been. I think most people are good, and I think most people have been fairly supportive. Now, there's some loud ones that are very unsupportive and things like that. When you're involved in stuff like this, it's a heavy burden that may follow you for a very long time, and I don't want that to discourage anybody from leaving. Um,
Hmm.
because it's definitely a better life to leave. It's like when you leave, you're letting that weight, you're letting that burden go. And not most people that leave don't speak out and do this sort of thing, like I'm doing. I mean, we're thankful for the ones that do, um, and incredibly thankful. But most don't. Most just want to go back to their regular lives, and it's hard to talk about for a lot of people. It's like someone said to me the other day. They said, it's like reliving a trauma. Like
Mm.
it's like relive. If talking about it, you have to put yourself back in that place and remember these things and talk about it, and like that's got to be hard. And I don't really think about it that way. I mean, it certainly is, but for me, this is my way of giving back and doing something positive, and it's a good mission, not
Hmm.
a something that's harmful, but actually saving lives.
Many veterans will exit from combat and become paramedics and rescue people. They volunteer, like myself did, for the Red Cross for that reason, because they want all that training and energy to do something good, and the reluctance to talk about it is very, I'd say, identical to many combat veterans. There is a degree of PTSD. Being in these groups is going to take its toll. We can see that. What I find curious is that when the person on the mic is so ferocious and frightening that they become number one most wanted, or most on the top of the watch list, and go home and is the nicest, most intelligent guy you've ever met, could we say to the audience who have been the target of that hate speech, they are terrified of extremists. They are terrified of that rhetoric. They are traumatized by it. If what happens in the mic is not what is brought home, is that, can we tell them, in other words, if we assess the actual threat of a person like yourself who was able to stand on that mic and mobilize so much more or less hatred, is it true that they're not as dangerous as they appear to be?
Hmm. Hmm.
Should they
That's
be?
that's
You see what I'm saying? Right.
that's a tough one, because we've seen cases and we know of cases where rhetoric has um, where someone, especially, okay, let's and I'm not going to name the guy again, but everybody's going to know who I'm talking about, where there was a young man that was radicalized on the internet, and he
Hmm.
walked into a black church and
Yeah.
started pulling the trigger on people. He was not a member of any group. He was radicalized on his own, on
Yeah.
the internet, and then he and did one of the most horrible things
Ever.
anybody can imagine.
Yeah.
And you have cases like that. And if you look at, use that young man as an example, you look at him, nobody in their right mind would have been afraid of this guy. Like, he was probably the kid that got picked on at school, you
Mhm.
know, and he maybe didn't have any friends, or very few.
Mhm.
You know, like, no one would have suspected that kid to be somebody that would turn into a mass murderer. So I don't want to come on here and say just be, you know, the person on the microphone spewing rhetoric may not be dangerous. They may be, they may not be. These are really difficult to judge.
Mhm.
Um, you don't know what a person is capable of in a lot of cases, and that's why we are doing some of the research that you mentioned as well, so we can
Mm.
try to kind of hopefully pinpoint some of these things.
Yeah. So it might not be, do not be hyper reactive. Don't underestimate them, but don't overreact either. Is what it seems like, because that person on the mic very well could just be enjoying propaganda. You have no idea what they're doing on the mic. Is there anything you can tell us that would help those people who are targets of extremism or just not extremists, how to better gauge that threat for themselves, for their own peace of mind? Any insights or advice? How could
As
we
far as,
gauge? Gauging the actual threat behind the leader or a movement. Is there any way to do that?
well, I think so, yes. I think by looking at some of the rhetoric of the organization, like, say you could pick a group and look at some of their rhetoric, and you have groups now especially that are openly, in some cases, or I feel like it's pretty open, where they are insinuating violence, or they're talking about violence and things like that. That definitely sets off warning bells for me.
Okay.
um, it set off warning bells when I was in the movement, and
Mm-hmm.
it sets off warning bells even more so now, because a lot of times we're seeing, if a leader is encouraging people to get involved in acts of violence or implying that they should, there's a lot of people that take that stuff seriously. I feel like, and I can't think of any exact instances right off the top of my head, but I can guarantee over my 25 years in leadership, there was quite a few different things that I stopped from happening in those positions. And I think this is something, something bad, bad things from happening, where people would come and say, "Hey, I was thinking about doing this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Is that something that you would approve of? Is that something I should do?" And these were not undercover operatives. These were like
Mm-hmm.
legit recruits and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and I always discouraged them from that. And in the NSM, the hierarchy, you would have unit leaders, state leaders that would report on what's, just general reports of what was going on with their unit. And if they said they had somebody like that was coming to them suggesting violence, those were people that we didn't want in the organization. So that's just in my own personal experience. I guarantee just about every organized group on the, and any organized extremist group has had that. Now, so is that leader discouraging it? In a lot of cases, I know leaders that do discourage it, or are they encouraging it? And that's where you
Mm-hmm.
got to really watch out. So if we look at, a lot of people aren't thinking about the big picture here. So most of the violence in and it would be interesting to get the data on this too, but most of the violence in my experience has come from, and I'm talking like major violence like murders and things like that, has not come from actual group members, but lone wolf people that were
Mm-hmm.
radicalized on their own,
Mm-hmm.
that left because they don't have that father figure, or that leader person that's saying, "Oh, don't throw your life away, don't go shoot somebody, don't go, do that, or don't,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
don't have that." So I personally think that those that are radicalized on their own, or those that are being radicalized online, a lot of times tend to be there's a larger propensity for extreme violence there.
Mm,
But again, it depends on the group, because if the group leader is promoting it, then you have a whole lot of people that could be getting involved in something really terrible. So it's very complex.
that's really interesting. I don't think in the research that I'm involved with anybody's actually said that before. That the ones I know that the omegas on their own, yeah, you end up with McVeighs and you end up yada dictators. But the ones online being radicalized, capable of more extremism. So that's going to be a research topic. And then, of course, the leadership. So, for the chat's purpose, what Mr. Scoop is saying is that if you examine their discourse closely, so that the ones that are calling for violence are going to be more dangerous than the ones who are not. So, if you want to gauge how serious is the threat, the word and the deed go hand in hand. So, maybe that will help you come to a determination on your own. There are two small questions, one large, one small. And then I wouldn't mind if you want to hang around and just chit chat a bit. But how important is monetization to the movement? Is it part of the drive? Is that what the upper echelon is concerned with? Is monetizing or funding the movement? And then what's the best way to grab extremists by the heels and get them out of there? So, how much does money matter to the boss? And then, what is the best way people can try to pull people out of extremist groups?
Okay, I'll do these one at a time. So the
Sure.
monetization one is you're doing this to me on purpose.
I
But
was born that way. I can't help it.
monetization is incredibly important, because you have to have funding to run any kind of organization. You've got expenses, you've got these kind of things. So depending again on the group. Now there's groups that we knew of that were pulling in considerable amounts of money because of their constituents or their supporters and things like that. The
Yeah.
organization I was with never had a lot of money. And I was running a music record label and things like that, and that's where I was getting some of the funding going, because the organization itself didn't have a lot of funds, but it had funds enough to operate and uh, get events going and things like that. So, but if you don't have that, I mean, depending on the organization, if there's no expenses, if it's just your skinhead family or something like that, and there's really no expenses, and you just hang out and drink beer or whatever, um, there's not many expenses there. But any type of actual organization, the organization I was running had radio shows. It had was developing computer games, and was doing all kinds of different things. So that costs money. So monetization is very, very important, as far as that goes. And but as far as like there's sometimes people, I think, on the outside see the leaders as like, oh well, they're getting rich off of this. I mean, not really, not really. There's some that are able to somehow pull in very large amounts of money. I was never one of those. It wasn't something that's not why I got involved in it, and I was never that good, I don't think, at raising money.
Mm-hmm.
But it really depends again on the group as far as monetization. But I think that's about it for that question. And I do remember the second one. The
Perfect.
second one was how to get people out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's for different people there's different ways to this, but what worked for me was being able to see the humanity of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the most effective tactics that we're able to use at Beyond Barriers too, is to reach them, is tapping into that humanity. Now we all have it. We all have that in our hearts and deep inside of ourselves, except for those sociopath, psychopath types, or those ones that are based and 100% driven by hate. They're just filled with hate. You're not probably not going to be able to get through to those types. But the average person that's involved in this, and I know some people don't like to hear this stuff because then they say, "No, everybody that's involved is all filled full of hate. They're subhuman. They're just evil. Blah blah blah." Is if you see that, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying to the public or anybody that's watching this, if you see your fellow man that way, your outlook is no different than that of hate groups,
Mm,
the Klan,
mm,
or something like that, that humanizes other
mm,
people and
mm.
says, "Well, all black people are this way, or all Jewish people are this way." You're doing the exact
Same
same.
thing. I have to echo that. Demonizing is demonizing.
Yep, and I understand it. I understand how they get there and how they see it, and the belief system of these movements is reprehensible. It's wrong, but when you understand the driving factors, that what brought these people there wasn't coming from a bad place, and this is I heard my friend Dia Khan said this on a podcast, and I thought, oh man, she nailed it. She absolutely nailed it. And she said, a lot of people in the movement, even though they're saying these horrific things and their ideologies is disgusting and horrendous,
Mm,
their the reason they joined was coming from a place of love. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people,
yeah.
but it's the truth. It's the truth. And that's when I joined, I thought I was doing something good, something noble, and that's why I stayed so long, is because I
Mhm.
thought it was good. Now the last few years when I should have got out, then it was more at that point it was more selfish reasons, like, well, what am I going to do? This is all I've done, the last couple years.
Mhm.
um but it was coming from a good place. So reverse osmosis, like how Beyond Barriers does this, help people to de-radicalize and disengage, is to get them to remember those things. What was it? Because once you're in there, once you're in the movement, it's harder. So disengagement, we look at disengagement before de-radicalization. In my
Mhm.
case, it was back. I was de-radicalizing and then disengaged, but that I don't recommend that. That's not the way it works for most people.
Mhm.
But to get them away from that echo chamber or that bubble, and then they can process things a little better. But if you can get somebody to remember like why it was that they joined, why they got involved, and then you can show them the humanity of the other, like meeting Daryl and Dia, and they were talking about how hate damaged them as young people. Daryl was like 7 years old, getting pelted with rocks in a Boy Scout parade
Mm.
because he was the only black child that was there. And he's telling me this story when I'm in the movement, and it didn't sit right with me because it's like, as a father or as a parent,
Mhm.
if somebody did that to one of my kids, I'd be hunting them down.
So
You
all of
know,
us would, no question. We would all be
yeah,
extreme that fast, that fast. No question.
yeah.
Um, I'd like
So
to.
how
Mhm.
process that if you can get the extremists to see that and go, look,
Mhm.
this is, to just say, hey, guess what, there's this story, and then tell them it might not resonate as much. But if you like, that's why I think people like Holocaust survivors, and there's so few of them left now, because of the time that's passed, but victims of hate, victims of extremism, if you can sit somebody down like that with somebody that's coming out, through immersion, and get them to hear those stories and to see that pain, if that doesn't tap into their humanity,
Then.
I mean, it typically does. It typically does. And
Mhm.
if nothing else, they might not leave right then and there, but it plants a seed that
Mm-hmm.
can be awakened later on, and they'll be thinking about that just like it did with me. So I'm using we're using the same processes.
And so you once said it was actually an open mind and love that brought you in. Once you get in, it's changed and fueled with hate. Your mind is closed. So if you can open their mind back up and remind them that they came in for a deep concern and loyalty and love, and then you can begin to try to rehumanize. So to reiterate that for chat, soldiers go to war because they don't want their country attacked. They think of their mothers. They defend, they fight, they die, they kill for that exact same reason.
Um,
Um, Second, people in American Indian movement, we also deeply love and care for our people, even to the exclusion of other races. So I am here and saying, to me, sometimes that seems awfully hypocritical. For those of us who have shot and killed 8, 9, 10 FBI agents as terrorists, as extremists, it's fine because we're Indian. What if what if we were white? How would you treat us then? Is my question to chat. I'll leave you to contemplate that. We've taken a lot of time with the guests, so Mr. Schoep, it is up to you. Would you rather stay for a few minutes, both of you? How do you feel, or do we need to let you go to the coffee?
I actually just want to kind of build on what Mr. Scoop was saying
If
real
he's
quick.
willing to sit, and we have one last question about Charlottesville, and that's it.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I a few more minutes too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The the thing that I see, because obviously I after coming out of that, there was a reconciliation process between my old ideology and the new ideas that I had to confront, not only about my own identity but about just the world in general.
Mhm.
Um, which led me ultimately to a very far leftist position, which I currently hold now. Um, I think that this is a twofold issue where there's a lack of, it's almost that indigenous solutions to colonialist problems.
Mhm.
There's a distinct lack of compassion for people like Mr. Scoop. Whether or not, hypothetically, if he were still a Nazi, you can disagree with his ideology, but the person sitting on the other side of that screen is still a human being. He has a family. He has a path. He deserves to have that future, and that applies to everyone,
Mhm.
whether we like it or not. Just full stop. Period. Like, you cannot debate that.
Okay.
As much as we want to, and as close to the sun as we might meme sometimes, like the out group, so to speak, that you don't like are still human beings. And it kind of goes a long way to say, well, how do we get extremists out of there? Well, a lot of them, from my experience, already want to come out. They're just afraid to come out because they don't know
Okay.
what they're going to do after that. They don't know how they're going to get treated if they're open about their extremism. They don't know how they're going to be treated by people on the other side. So while I'm not telling anybody to agree with those ideas, whether it's National Socialism, I'm not saying agree with those ideas or even hear them out. I'm saying ask the right questions. Ask, hey, why did you join? What are your fears?
Yeah.
Reassure them. Don't necessarily start debating them. Reassure them, like, oh, you're afraid that your race is going to die? Hey, I'm an indigenous person. I'm afraid that my people are going to die too.
True.
I understand. We have that common ground. But let me reassure you of these things. If we work together, we're not going to die, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. Stop trying to fucking argue with these people. They don't want to hear your arguments. They're goddamn human beings. Like, reassure them. They're scared. They're terrified. They're like Mr. Scoop said. Their position is that of something that came from love and duty and honor and an obligation that they feel, and it's a genuine feeling for them. Stop treating them like shit. Like, I don't know how else to phrase it. It's an indigenous solution to a colonialist problem. Stop otherizing people. Attack the ideology when they're ready, but like treat them like fucking human beings first. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse so much and get so heated about that, but it's just like a thing that I see so much,
It's because you have two
and it just
Indians in a room, and we have to go
one of
from
them
a movement to genocide, and yeah, we get a little, yeah, emotional. Mr.
a
Scoop,
little heated.
what do you think of our fine young warrior Yana's statements?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and he's right. And see that's really well said, man. I mean, that was awesome. And he's right. I mean, this is part of the problem. I mean, you have this polarization right now in the country between right and left and all that, and you have this punch a Nazi in the face or punch a
Mhm.
commie in the face on the other side, all this kind of stuff going back and forth. I tell you what, no one's left a movement. I've said this before. I don't want to make it a catchphrase. It probably should be a meme, right? But no movement by getting punched in the face. It doesn't happen. In fact, every single time I've had my head split open.
Yeah.
I've went through assassination attempts. I've had all kinds of violence done to me as well, and
Oh my God.
not once did I question, my involvement in the movement when
Oh
I
my
got
God.
attacked or family was victimized or things like that. It further radicalized me every single time that I got pressured by anyone. It made me double down on my activities and do even more.
Oh.
So, th-
Oh.
you know, once in a while, you will hear cases of. Okay, out of all of the people that I know or have heard about that have left the movement, and we're talking hundreds,
Hmm.
of people. I can think of like one or two that left because they were doxxed or because they were beat up or pressured or things like that. I can think of just a handful.
It outraged him
So
even
that
more.
doesn't. Yeah, it typically if you've got and I, how do I say this without sounding unsensitive, but I feel like if you're gonna leave something that you're part of because you got punched or beat up or whatever, then you probably didn't believe in it in the first place, or you're just being
True.
spineless, and that's not the right reason to leave anyways. You're not gonna. I mean, it's good that they left, right? But that's not. It doesn't work. It usually, people that are in this stuff, it's gonna make things worse, and they thrive off of that. I know just
Yeah.
from in the NSM, when we had clashes or things like that with the other side, the guys,
Yeah.
it's like remotivated and re-energized them. So
Sure.
I think it's incredibly a negative way to go about things. And just like Yanni said, if we can see the humanity of the person sitting across from us, and I'm just as guilty of it. I'm not saying that I'm Mr. Know-it-all and that um,
Hmm.
I dehumanize people. And this is a little funny, but it's not funny, but it's ironic.
Hmm.
As I was leaving the last few years in the movement, and I was doing interviews, and I was very public. I remember talking to different reporters, and I was telling them, well, the press dehumanizes us, the public dehumanizes us,
Hmm.
and I'm talking about that, and I wasn't wrong in that sense. I
Hmm.
mean, the people in the movement are often dehumanized,
Yeah.
but the hypocrisy of it, the
Mm.
hypocrisy.
Oh my God.
Here's the Nazi talking about dehumanization. I'm a guy that was spent, over 2 decades dehumanizing entire groups of people, and I'm sitting there talking to the media about dehumanization. Nobody called me out on it, but they were just looking at me like, huh.
Yeah. They, yes. Yeah, and you can speak from that, and this makes all the difference in the world to me, and I hope to many, many people in the chat. He can talk about the irony and the hypocrisy, and he can talk about it anywhere he sees it. Sitting with two indigenous people, a militant activist with a kill tally, and a young man we almost lost, and we're so glad that he didn't stay to celebrate Charlottesville longer than he did. Let's put it to you that way. Talking about a person who has to sit, an American citizen, with children in his arms, facing assassination attempts for his cause. Only in America, right? Um, Two of the most, maybe most important questions. One of the most pressing. Um, how can I recognize if a young person in my life is susceptible to being recruited to joining? Can you tell a sister and a mother here with us today what signs they need to look for because members of their family seem to be leaning in that direction and they desperately want to do something? Can you speak to the mother and the sister and tell them what signs to look for? If you'd like to speak with them in private later, fine, but can you tell our chat who are concerned, especially now, more are going to radicalize after the coup? Can you tell them what signs they might be able to look for?
Well, anybody is susceptible to it. There's not, some of these narratives where they say, oh, well, so and so, you have to be from a broken home or any of these kind of things. There is those cases, and those aren't untrue. Everyone has their own journey and things like that, but anyone is susceptible to it. You can have the best family in the world. I had a wonderful family,
Mm-hmm.
and still ended up making these unfortunate choices. But to if they see signs of someone in their home, a brother, a sister, or a family member, whatever, that's leaning or that seems to be um, heading in that direction or getting radicalized. And right now, with the tumultuous times we're having in this country, a lot of people are struggling with that, and we're seeing instead of being in the center, we're seeing more radicalization to both the extreme versions of the right and extreme versions of the left. And it's better. You can be on the right, you can be on the left, you can be proud of your heritage and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's when you take that and you go to the extremes, or when you start hurting other people, or where you start talking about violence or things like that. So in a case, and I'm going around the question a little bit here, but in a case where you have somebody that's looking into those things, if you come at it directly and get angry about it and try to argue with them, one of the things that we've found with talking with people that are, even in my own personal experience, if someone would have come to me, you're wrong, your belief system's crap, this is, how can you believe this garbage? That, like getting punched in the face, is all it's going to do is make that individual angry, and they're probably going to argue with you. A healthy debate is one thing, but when argument gets to anger and then people are shouting, neither side hears the other. So I think the best way to stop someone from getting radicalized, and this is probably one of the most important things that we as Americans, or we as civil society, need to work on as a whole, is to not demonize the other side. And I mean, I'm on Twitter, and you can go on Twitter and you see it now with the Democrats and the Republicans even.
Yeah.
And these are not even extremists. These are the mainstream political parties. And these guys are both sides, blue checkmark people, everything, are going at it. And I've even seen people in the CVE, the countering violent extremism community that we work in, that are saying, hey, if you're a Trump supporter, you're an extremist, or you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
I mean, how does a, and vice versa? They're saying, oh, well, you voted for Biden, you're a communist. Neither of these things are accurate. It's not true. But that's the society. That's the way society is getting, and a lot of this cancel culture stuff, where oh, I don't agree with you, so you should be canceled. You should never have a job again. You should never be able to work anywhere. You should be locked up and thrown away the key. This kind of rhetoric is very disconcerting. It's very dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
and it can actually trigger people to become more extreme. I'm seeing people now since I've left the movement, you know, and as we're seeing society radicalizing in different ways, I'm seeing people that never would have gotten involved in any of this kind of stuff feeling, you know, leaning more in those directions because they're feeling more and more pressure from the other side. And this is where we as Americans really got to get this dialogue going. So have conversations with the person that's potentially getting involved in this stuff.
Mhm.
If somebody had taken me to, like, now I've spoken at synagogues, and I have lots of Jewish friends and things like that, which would have been unheard of years ago.
Mhm.
But if somebody would have, you know, at some point introduced me to some of these people that I kept blocking out of my life over all those years, I might not have ever taken the path that I was on. So if they're if they feel a family member is getting involved in this type of extremism, have them talk to somebody, or have them talk to somebody that's been in the movement. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to them, or somebody, one of the staff at Beyond Barriers, and kind of um, you know, see why they're feeling that way, or you know,
Mhm.
start on your own at home, and just kind of try to understand why they're thinking that,
Mhm.
and open it up to dialogue, and really show them the humanity. And I know in schools they teach the Holocaust and all that, and I don't think that's enough. I think it's probably a lot of people have a disconnect to it. I know I did. I was like, well, this happened a long time ago. It doesn't matter to me at the time, you know. But had you brought somebody in like Daryl Davis to the classroom, and you could see the man's pain about what he went through as a child, or maybe bring that Holocaust survivor in and
Mhm.
talk about the horrors that they went through, or
Mhm.
anyone
Mhm.
that does this type of thing, you know, I think that's gonna get through a lot better to somebody. So talk to a victim of extremism,
Mm.
or somebody that's a former extremist that's been there, done that. It's not a good life. It's not something um, that they want to get into, and you know, I try to use myself as an example in those cases, uh,
Mhm.
to people, and sometimes they'll try to pick out like the good things. Well, you got to travel all over the country when you were doing that sort of thing. Well, you can travel all over the country too. You don't have to be an you
Yeah.
know, manage your funds a little better. You know, it's, I mean, there's just, you could, I know so many people that were like killed, that killed themselves, killed other people,
Oh.
um to prison for 40 years, you know. Or this is your life. You only got one shot at it. I mean, this is not something you want to get into. And an impressionable young person getting into it, and then say they have a bad mentor, a bad leader, a bad or they're radicalizing online on their own, and end up doing like that kid that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier in the program, doing something like that. Your life's done. It's
Mhm.
over, and
Mhm.
and that's your one shot, and you've just lost it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
that was a long rant. Sorry for that.
Yeah, that was so important. You synthesized five or six of these questions, and these are the folks that need to understand, and you can only learn it from someone like yourself, Mr. Schoop, which is why I'm so very grateful that you came in after what happened Wednesday, that you found the time to do this, and you've stayed longer than we had scheduled, and it's worth every minute of it. And Yona, having to hear the two of you together adds the context.
Mm.
Chat has some really good chewy questions. Well, what I'd like to know is, we can't get to all of them, which is good. Is it possible for us to compile those questions and have them emailed to you, Mr. Scoop, and you could possibly answer them at
Mm,
a later time if you'd like
you
to?
can fire away at me now, because I mean, if I don't like, I'm with
Not
the
good with
writing.
email like I am?
You might get
Okay.
6 months
Um,
from now.
it's that's up to you. I'm pretty time conscious, so um, there was one question I think is the one question people always want to know. Jesus had a moment of doubt and pain, but went through with it anyway. Jeff Scoop had a moment of doubt and pain and walked away. What was that moment of doubt that the movement was not right? How did it occur? Had something changed in your surroundings? Because before you sat with your friends, there was doubt. You had been contemplating leaving the movement for, I believe it was 2, 3 years before you actually did. What started the doubt?
I think I already answered that one. Meeting with Daryl and Dia, and there was a few other incidents. You know, just being able to see that humanity. Being living here in Detroit as well. I sometimes I say the city of Detroit helped de-radicalize me. White people are the minority here,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, so
Okay.
I've met a lot of people of all different races, and it's sort of like, okay, you know, I'm how are we any different? You know,
Right.
sure, you know how, you know, you think about these things when you get out, and you think, how ignorant is it that I don't like this entire group of people because of their religion or because of the hue of their skin? Like, how ignorant is that? You know, and you can't spew that at somebody
Yeah.
that's in the movement. But I heard somebody say something about the other day. They said, you know, if and Daryl Davis says this too. He says, you know, if your crowning achievement in life, you know, and I said, you know, there's nothing wrong with being proud to be white or proud to be indigenous or proud to be black or Jewish or whatever. There's nothing wrong with
Uh,
that. But
real
if
quick,
that's your crowning achievement,
real quick,
go
could I
ahead.
just cut in?
Yep,
We just got a raid on the Anarchist Laboratory. I am gonna pop over there for the rest of the night. It was awesome meeting you, Mr. Scoop.
you
I
too.
super dope that like the former leader of the NSM like finally said fuck it and walked away. Like, and the fact that you're actually like starting an organization, the Beyond Barriers organization. Anybody in chat, in Udi's chat, you know, check it out, donate to his cause, you know, go help people. Like, I don't know, don't be an asshole, right? Like, treat people with humanity. Treat people, respect their humanity. That's like the big takeaway from this. But yeah,
Okay.
it was a great debate tonight. Thank you for having me on, Udi. And again, awesome meeting you, Mr. Scoop. Hopefully, we can have future discussions if possible.
For sure. It was an
All
honor
right.
meeting you, brother. Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything you said on the program tonight too. It was really great.
Yeah. No problem. All right.
Okay,
You have a good
Yana.
night.
I'll come back and peek in on you. Thank you.
Yep. No
Um,
problem.
yeah, I'm sorry. That happens on Twitch. His channel has been raided, and that means he's being
Oh,
called back to his duty station, so to speak. He's actually sitting on another stream right now, and a co-host, so his partner has called him back to his duty station. So that's our.
bright young man. It was
Oh yeah.
great to meet him. What I was saying though, if your crowning achievement is your race,
Hmm.
you know, you might have a few other things you need to straighten up, because if that's what you're proud of, like you're saying, well, I'm proud to be white or I'm proud to be black or whatever.
Hmm.
If that's your crowning achievement, you need to get to work on some things. You know, go win yourself a trophy in basketball or something. You know, golf. I don't know. But if that's your crowning achievement, and that's what, you know, we're born this way. You know,
Yeah.
Daryl Davis said this. I heard him say it a number of times when we've spoken different places.
Uh-huh.
So, and I
Mike's going.
sometimes I
Go ahead.
wonder, you know, like how, if that's what your crowning is. I'm sorry.
The mic goes in and out a bit. If you would have your audio tech fix that. But
Oh, maybe I did or something.
if your race is your crowning achievement and you were born with it, then you haven't achieved much. That's a funny thing to say.
Try it again.
What?
Just talk for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
If your race
Thank you.
was your crowning achievement and you were born with it, you haven't really achieved much. You need to go get a golf trophy. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that was it.
Hilarious. I'm like, ooh, Tiger Woods could talk to you maybe. Um,
It's simple, but it's true though, you know.
It is.
And I don't think anybody in the movement thinks of that. No one ever. I never heard anybody say that when I was in, and I thought, man, this could be pitched at the guys and the ladies that are in it. Like, is that all you got? You know, your skin color, you're born that way. You didn't have a choice, you know, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so that's not really. I mean, you can be proud of it, but that shouldn't be a crowning achievement, right?
true.
We were born that way.
You didn't earn it, and that means you've achieved nothing since literally the day you were born. It's like a
Let,
participation
let,
trophy.
yes, it's a participation trophy. Exactly. Exactly. Great. Hmm.
Oh, um, okay. Someone wants to know, Des Steele. And this would be hard to answer. Do you think there's a correlation at all between the alt-right movement and QAnon?
Hmm.
The Kool-Aid people and the extreme. Boogaloo,
There's
whatever.
there's there is crossover. There's crossover between these things. Now, it doesn't mean that because you're QAnon that necessarily that you're a racist or an anti-Semite.
Hmm.
You could be. You certainly could be, but and there certainly is some crossover between these different movements. But again, it's one of those things you can't really fit in the box. You might be QAnon and not be racist, but and just believe in lizard people or something. You know, but you know,
Mm,
so those some of those things are there's some crossover. Yeah.
mm, yeah, that's I'd have to say that's almost all anyone can say, 'cause lizard people, my goodness, flat Earth lizard people, and and then you got the Boogaloo boys. I don't know. My money would go on the Boogaloo boys. Um, although
Boogaloo's confusing.
it's recently hit the media yesterday. Someone involved in the analysis saying there might be a connection. And I'm like, let's just complicate this now and make it even worse. Okay, how about let's not? I think my call to action is to question these things respectfully and persistently, because we've had enough of the Kool Aid. We got COVID, we got a coup, we have enough Kool Aid. Um, the recognizing the humanity of the quote out group people, I think Mr. Schoep has told us about that with two encounters. There is a that particular encounter with Dia was
Dia.
was captured on film, and rather than have him repeat it, if we can get a link to that, if you want to see what sort of happened to him when he spoke to Dia, it was uh, incredibly tense, awkward, painful, and real. And if you'd like to see it, we'll get the
My
link
hair
so that
okay?
you
It's
can
not
watch
flying
what
around in funny
happened
directions.
when I think that
So
final
as you know, I
moment
am a woman
really
of color.
came.
Yes.
And
Yes. I am the daughter
he
of
doesn't need to
immigrants.
talk
I
anymore
am a
about it
Muslim.
because you'll be able to
Mhm.
see
I
it.
am a feminist. I
It
am a
struck
lefty
me when I
liberal.
saw it.
Um,
And later I was able to ask about it. But I mean, that's his personal space. Okay, you can see it. It was caught on camera, like everything is. It was a moment. You want to see something rather extraordinary? We'll give you the link. You can watch it for yourself. Um, Lesser known dog whistles. That one, if trash, if you can clarify that one, and I'll give you a minute. The research about the lawsuit last week, I found myself. This is one of our debaters. I found myself becoming more frustrated with the premise with which the lawsuit relied on. What can the average citizen do in response to malicious, retributive lawsuits like this? Is there a better call to action than complaining? It's time to ask you, Mr. Scoop, in all due fairness. Um, what do you think about this lawsuit? Should Nazis be sued? Should Nazis go to jail? Or is the state responsible? It's fair to answer, but he's under certain restrictions. Can you answer that?
Well, the way the lawsuit is, and I'm no lawyer, so this is just my personal opinions. I'm not giving legal advice or anything like that. But in my well, in America, you can sue anyone for anything,
True.
and there's a lot of
This type of
different nuance in
But an
this,
anti-extremism.
and what I think is a little strange is I'm being in this case, the lawsuit is really broad and overstretching in the sense where anybody that was a known figure that was there, like I wasn't
Jeff
involved in
says I
any
can
of the
come and
planning, I
film with
wasn't
them
in
at
the
their next
Discord, I
event.
wasn't at the Tiki March.
or would I be safe just walking
No
in?
NSM members were arrested for any of the violence or anything like that, but yet from my understanding and what I've seen, the strongest evidence the other side has is whatever was going on in that Discord, and I didn't even see that until the lawsuit was filed. So having people that didn't even have members that were involved in the violence or anything like that roped into this, I think is I think the whole suit is overstretched because I organized street rallies for 25 years. And actually, and I don't know if this was brought up in the debate or not, but the Klan was there in Charlottesville. I think it was 3 weeks or something before this event, and the police did get out there and separate both sides. And typically at these events, the event planners, anyways, any event that I planned when I was with the NSM, you usually met with the cops, or you at least talked to them, or not in every case that I did when I was the leader, but at least our whoever was the permit holder for the NSM. In this case in Charlottesville, we didn't have nothing to do with the planning, yet I'm being accused of being a planner. Did I go? Yes. I think we put something on the website for the NSM, saying that I was going to be there and encourage people to go, maybe. But as far as being an organizer, certainly wasn't, because these type of things, the police, the authorities, they know what they need to do to keep both sides separated. They know how that works. It's not something new. It didn't just pop up yesterday, and they know that there's typically problems of different sorts sometimes at these, when you get people with extreme points of view from both sides together. It's sometimes it can be a little dicey. So that's kind of my thoughts on
That it's overstretched.
whole
It's
thing.
overreaching. Yeah, from someone who organized rallies. Yeah, I am thinking that most of us are leaning toward, regardless of how they feel about extremism, that there's something fishy with this lawsuit. We're not going with it. It's not satisfying anybody. Now this chat and this team has read every page of every document, and independently, it's disturbing to them. The question here came down to responsibility. So then we have to ask you let's put you in the hot seat. As the leader of the MSM who did attend that rally, do you feel any sense of personal responsibility for what happened, or for the fervor of the groups? Do you feel any personal responsibility for their level of let's get ready for a fight? How do you feel personally? If you can answer without, I don't know, incriminating yourself, whatever. How do you feel about that as the leader?
Well, I want to say former leader of the NSM.
Leader.
I was the leader of the NSM at that time. I think that that no one should ever lose their life at a rally, and my heart goes out to Heather Heyer's family, to her mother, and all of them. Nothing like that should ever happen. I regret I regret going. I regret being there, but I had no way of knowing that somebody would drive a car into a crowd of people. It was not somebody that I never met the guy. There was so many different people there from different organizations. We didn't even know 99% of the people there or what was going to happen or things like that. I would have just assumed at any other rally that the authorities would keep both sides separated. And they found in the Heafy report that for whatever reason, someone made an order that to let people fight and to allow or even encourage what took place there, because it should have never been that way. It should have never happened like that, and it was nothing new. These kind of rallies have went on. There was violence at some of the ones in California and some of the other rallies when both sides got together, and the rally they had a few weeks there previous with the Klan, all sides were separated and there was very minimal violence. So they knew exactly what they needed to do to stop that taking place. But what I want to say besides that, though, is whatever side, no one wants to say, like, especially me being out of the movement, like the last thing I want to do is stick up for white nationalists, especially after my past, and I'm not doing that. But what I do want to say about a case like this is people need to think about this when they're thinking about the case. If when you organize a rally and it not that I was an organizer, but when you have a rally or you attend a rally and then all of a sudden something bad happens and lawsuits come and things like that, I think this particular lawsuit could any kind of lawsuits can set a precedent. So if they say, well, the people that are being held in this lawsuit, I'm trying to think of the right words, but I know what I'm trying to say.
It's difficult too, so I appreciate it. Take your time.
If I see it as an attack on free speech, because what happened there was horrendous, okay? And there was people that were involved in violence, and some of them were arrested, and some of them are in prison, and of course the person that did the murder is in prison, and that, to me, that's the rule of law. But now if you're going to if you're going to set a precedent that these kind of rallies can't go on, even though it's bad, I wish nobody would have hate and say the hateful things that the far right movement does. If you start cracking down on events like this and you're not allowed to peaceably assemble, the far right or any movement, I don't care what it is. If you're told you no longer have the right to peaceably assemble and get out and have these rallies, what is the alternative? I'm posing that as a question, but I already know the answer. If people feel they're being silenced, and this falls back onto the cancel culture thing too. If you're telling somebody that their voice doesn't deserve to be heard, even though it might be ugly, it might be hateful, they shouldn't be saying it, it's disgusting. But if you're telling them that they don't have the right to be heard, or you could be sued because you went out there and there was a fight or whatever, I fear, and I don't like using the word fear, but I fear that is going to open doors to the kind of violence we've never seen in this country ever before. Because if you start silencing people and you tell them they don't have a right to assemble, they don't have and the other side of this argument, they'll say, no one's telling them they don't have the right to assemble. Okay, you have the right to assemble, but you might be sued at the same time, and right. you know, right. You really don't have the right to assemble is what they're trying to say. So I don't know if they don't think about this stuff, or if I see it as opening a Pandora's box of violence that really is really bad. I don't think it's a good thing.
I think most of us see that it has already opened that box, and there were many correlations between the lawsuit, the escalation of violence, quintuple membership, 27% increase in violence incidences since the announcement of the lawsuit. The general consensus is that's all you're going to do is sue me. I've got nothing to lose. Screw it. That's it. On the other hand, if the freedom of speech and expression is not protected, is not secured, and you're right, maybe I won't go to jail for standing on a platform uh, spewing hate speech, but I'm going to get sued, then that's what's called a chilling effect. And a chilling effect, according to the Supreme Court, cannot and has never really actually been tolerated in terms of the First Amendment. So Charlottesville, again and again, draws on that. It becomes a First Amendment, even though what happened was not a First Amendment. Fields was not expressing his First Amendment rights in that car, etc., etc., etc. But so many of these points I think are valid. I think the chat is very concerned with what looks like a travesty of justice. The justice system is all you have left. If that goes down, what's left? And the violence escalating off the charts, more radicalization. Um, Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to go back and review that again and contemplate what you've said. Someone asked a good one, which is in terms of the FBI announcing the infiltration of the FBI and police force by right-wing extremist racists. How bad do you think that infiltration is in your assessment? Can you speak to any of that?
How the microphone broke up a little bit. You said that the movement.
I think it's because we have static here. It's so cold here. The infiltration of the police force and the FBI by over the last 30 years by white supremacists and extremists. How extensive do you think that is in your opinion?
Well, I mean, when I was in the NSM, we had lots of people that were going into the military. Not so many in police departments. There was, a few here and there. And as far as the FBI, I mean, they background check like no other. I would have a hard time believing too many people from the movement made it into there because. Uh, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that
Okay.
study or that. But I think some of that is a little. I don't want to say it's completely far fetched because there's certainly we wanted people in different levels of government. We wanted people tipping us off to things and trained and all that sort of thing. So. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I don't think it's quite as wide scale. I think as a lot of people would like to project it, just from my personal experience.
I hope not. I do have the report. I can give it to you if you'd like. No, we usually end. You know me. I always end with a big banger. And then I have to actually take a break and sign off. But this is from. All right, I don't know exactly when this was said. I'm gonna read this. This was Jeff Schoep, and I'd like you to comment on yourself. This was a Jeff Schoep before we met you, I believe, and I'd like you to comment on your own words. Do you think you can do that?
You're pulling up a quote or something from the past. Is that what you're saying?
This seems to be, I think, a paraphrase or taken from a speech.
Sure.
Now more than ever, your folk need you to do your part, and if you do not wish to do anything, then you need to get out of our way. We do not need dead weight, and we do not want to carry anyone onto the field of battle as this war for our survival as a people rages on. That was Jeff Schoep. What would Jeff Schoep say to that speech now?
Well, it's shameful. I mean, but this was the rhetoric. You know, when I met Daryl Davis, you know, we were having a good conversation, and then I said, you know, I would fight to the last bullet for my people. You know, I would say certain things that I knew um, would get people's attention in that sense when I was in the movement. So
Mm-hmm.
saying these type of things, rhetoric was and propaganda was very important, and um, a historical example I can use, like in Germany in World War II, at the end when Berlin was falling, Joseph Goebbels was getting on the radio and saying, you know, we're winning this war, get out there and fight. And they had the Volkssturm, which was basically old people and kids and injured people that, you know, some of them didn't even have proper weapons. You know, he was encouraging them to get out there and fight, and they were just getting mowed down. And that was it was a propaganda thing.
Mm-hmm.
The NSM, and that's a really extreme example, but the NSM in a lot of ways would use this tactic as well. Like we could go do a demo or something like that and say, I can't remember where it was this bad, but you say 5 people showed up. You would, after that, you know, we'd be there and say there was 5 people. Man, this is terrible. There's only 5 people. But we get back home, or when we do, you know, put out stuff on the radio show or on our newsletter or on the internet, we said NSM had a great victory in Chicago or wherever it was that we did the 5-man rally, and we make, you know, the propaganda would be, it was a great victory for the day. So I mean, that's I'm not excusing my rhetoric and the things that I said before. I'm just explaining why sometimes some of those things were said, and you know, it was to get people pumped up. It was to raise morale. A leader wants to keep the morale of the people up, and that's one of the ways to do it.
Mm-hmm. And how far away from that person would you say you are today?
Completely different. Absolutely completely different. um I mean, I think it's anybody that follows what I do now, it's I've had people come out of the movement and that have that reached out, and they just, and if I talk to them or meet them, they're almost just staring in disbelief. They're like,
Yeah.
Of all the people that were going to come out, I never thought I'd see you out. I just, this is great. You know, I mean, they're happy, but at the same time, it's just like this, whoa, you know, like, hey, if somebody would have told me 10 years ago you're going to be out and you're going to be speaking out against the movement, I would have, might have slapped them in the face or something. You know,
So how
I wouldn't
dare
have
you?
believed
Yeah.
it.
As a journalist
Believed it.
and someone in the human rights industry, of course, you've been, you know, you've been watched. From what I only knew of you through our networks and things, it was believed that you were so embedded that you were, as they say, not salvageable. And then to sit in front of you and meet you, the stories are so not in alignment. As a leader of a hate group, you did a wonderful job terrorizing people. As a thinking, intelligent human being, you've done a courageous thing in walking away, something most leaders have not done and will not do and cannot do. I have no doubt that you'll succeed. I worry more for the other leaders and the other members of other groups. And so that's why myself and this chat are committed to trying to do something about this instead of talk about it. That you've spent so much time with us. I can't thank you enough. I have to exit, and chat's going to be talking about this for a while. You're welcome to stop back in anytime and visit.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and it was an honor and a privilege, and everybody have a great night, and congrats to everybody on the debate. It was what I heard was great.